The story The Old Loaf of Bread. One day a poor boy named Num passed by a fancy bakery. The aroma of fresh bread made his stomach growl with hunger, but Num only had a few coins, not enough to buy anything. He stood quietly at the shop's entrance, gazing longingly at the golden loaves behind the glass. The baker inside noticed him stepping out. With a warm smile, the baker handed him an old loaf of bread. "Here, take this. It's from yesterday. Not fresh, but still good to eat." Num accepted the bread with tears welling up in his eyes. "Thank you, sir. I'll never forget your kindness." Years later, Num became the owner of a famous restaurant chain. One day he saw an elderly man selling lottery tickets on the street. The man's figure looked familiar. Num realized it was the same baker who had helped him long ago. He approached the man, bought all his tickets, and invited him into his restaurant. "I'm the boy you once gave an old loaf of bread to. Your kindness gave me strength to reach where I am today. Now it's my turn to repay you." From that day on, Num supported the baker, treating him like family. The story The Old Jacket. One day, a poor boy named Hung wandered past a fancy clothing store. He stopped in front of the glass window, gazing at the warm coats inside, dreaming of having one to fight off the winter cold. But Hung only had a few coins, not enough to buy anything. The store owner, an elderly woman, noticed him, standing, shivering, outside. With a kind smile, she brought out an old jacket. "Here, take this. It's not new, but it's still warm enough to use." Hung accepted the jacket with tears in his eyes. "Thank you, ma'am. I will never forget your kindness." Years passed, and Hung became a famous fashion designer. One day, while walking down the street, he saw an old woman selling fruit by the roadside. Looking closely, Hung realized it was the same woman who had helped him years ago. He approached her, bought all her fruit, and invited her into his store. "Do you remember me? I'm the boy you once gave an old jacket to. Your kindness warmed my heart and gave me the strength to succeed. Now it's my turn to repay you." From that day on, Hung took care of the elderly woman as if she were his own mother, giving her peaceful and warm days in the final years of her life. The story The Cup of Warm Milk. One cold evening, a poor girl named Lan wandered the streets, shivering in the winter air. She hadn't eaten all day, and her body felt weak. Passing by a small cafe, she stopped to peer inside, watching people enjoy their warm meals. The cafe owner, a kind middle-aged man, noticed her from inside. He stepped out with a cup of warm milk and a small piece of bread. "Here, take this. It's not much, but it will help you stay warm." Lan gratefully accepted the food, her hands trembling as she held the warm cup. "Thank you, sir. I'll never forget your kindness." Years later, Lan became a successful doctor running her own clinic. One day, an elderly man came to her clinic looking frail and in need of care. As she spoke with him, she realized it was the kind cafe owner who had helped her long ago. She smiled warmly and said, "Do you remember me? I'm the girl you once gave a cup of milk to. On a cold evening, your kindness gave me hope when I needed it most. Now let me take care of you." From that day forward, Lan made sure the old man never had to worry about food or medical care again, treating him as if he were her own father. The story The Borrowed Candle. On a dark and stormy night, a young boy named Men was struggling to study by the dim light of a street lamp. His family was too poor to afford electricity, but Men was determined to learn. An old neighbor, a widow named Mrs. Wah, saw him from her window. Feeling pity for the boy, she walked over with a small candle. "Here, take this. It's just a candle, but it might help you study better." Mint the candle with gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you so much, Grandma. I will never forget your kindness." Years passed, and Men became a well-known professor. One day, he returned to his old neighborhood and saw an elderly woman struggling to carry a bag of groceries. It was Mrs. Wah. He rushed over to help her, and after ensuring she was comfortable, he said, "Grandma, what do you remember me? I'm the boy you gave a candle to that stormy night. Your kindness lit up my life in more ways than one. Now it's my turn to repay you." From that day on, Mine took care of Mrs. Wah, ensuring she lived the rest of her life in comfort and warm, just as she had once warmed his heart with a single candle. The story The Pair of Old Shoes. Long ago, a poor boy named Twang walked barefoot to school every day. His family couldn't afford shoes, and His feet were covered in cuts and bruises from the rough, rocky paths. One morning, an elderly shoemaker, feeling sorry for the boy, the shoemaker, called him over and handed him a pair of old but sturdy shoes. "These are new, but they'll protect your feet. Take them and don't worry about paying me." Two in size filled with tears as he thanked the man. "Thank you, sir. I'll never forget this kindness." Years later, Twain became a successful entrepreneur who owned a chain of shoe stores. One day, he learned of an old man struggling to make a living, repairing shoes on the street when he approached. Twain immediately recognized the kind shoemaker from his childhood. Try note down beside him and said, "Sir, do you remember me? I'm the boy you gave those old shoes to. They helped me walk the path to where I am today. Now it's my turn to help you." From that moment on, one provided the elderly man with a home and ensured he never had to work another day, treating him with the respect and gratitude he had always carried in his heart.